Welcome back once again to The Long Dark. I'm your host, Lonelywolf, and in this second video of my redone guide videos, which I'm finally getting back to, we're going to discuss something critical to your ongoing survival in The Long Dark, and that is something I like to call playstyle tuning, which we couple with goal setting. This concept is something that comes naturally to veteran players of The Long Dark. In fact, if you know what to look for, you'll notice these items in almost all of my playthroughs, or how other TLD players and streamers engage with the Silent Apocalypse. Let's approach this concept one concept at a time. First, playstyle tuning. We'll get to goals in the next video. What do I mean by playstyle tuning? I'll harken back to the first and previous video in this series. The core gameplay loop of The Long Dark is comprised of the balancing act of two diametrically opposed and yet interlinked systems: your health, also known as condition, and your needs. As a quick reminder, you need various resources and gear items to keep your needs topped up, which in turn prevents condition loss. The balancing act is that you must explore the world around you to gather these resources, exposing you to the cold, hostile wildlife, and inclement weather, all of which can directly and negatively affect your condition. With that reminder out of the way, playstyle tuning is the act of how you go about balancing these two systems. In difficulty modes like Stalker, Voyager, and Pilgrim, the player is not met with significant weather resistance early on, leaving only hostile wildlife, unless of course you're a Pilgrim player. This means you have ample opportunity to explore the world around you to gather resources and level up your gear. This calculus does change drastically once you get to the Interloper level. However, this discussion is relevant to all experience modes, hence me focusing on it to such a degree. If you remember in my first video, I called your condition or your health a resource to be expended. You will, at times, need to expose yourself to the cold or work your way through wolves or bear to get to an objective. This can, and will, result in a hit to your condition. The art of playstyle tuning, however, is how aggressive or passive you are in this activity. In Interloper, for example, one must adopt a very aggressive playstyle in terms of world exploration and movement to even have a hope of surviving, let alone thriving. For those who don't play Interloper much, this comes as quite a hard concept to manage. Risk avoidance is one of the hallmarks of long-lasting runs in the lower difficulty levels. Yet, Interloper requires you to throw yourself nearly headfirst into these risks just to get a foothold on survival. But even Interloper is not a knife's edge. What do I mean by that? I mean that there is an upper and a lower bound to how aggressive one must be in risk aversion or risk acceptance. In Pilgrim, this window of balance is quite wide. You can spend days on end in a single location with just your starting gear and the first location you've looted supplying you with extensive clothing and food options. Or you can choose to explore the world at your leisure, even with some risk of cold and inclement weather, without any fear of hostile wildlife. Therefore, there's not really a significant maximum level of risk. But even so, you can still choose to play quite leisurely or adopt a bit more of an aggressive movement and looting pattern. Voyager does step this balance up. The lower bound of acceptable risk tolerance grows tighter. The weather does get harsher and colder sooner, and there's much less loot than in Pilgrim. The upper level of risk tolerance doesn't move much. You can still adopt a more aggressive exploration and looting pattern without undue risk of hostile wildlife or potential run-ending snowball effects. It can still happen, of course, but with planning, it's not likely. Stalker moves both needles as the lower bound comes up higher, but the upper one now actually comes in closer. Regions can be much colder. Fires must actually be brought up to temperature to warm you up from the cold, and hostile wildlife is much harsher, and you will need to move sooner to get more resources. There's still ample resources in even a single region, but there won't be within a single location within that region. This forces Stalker players to brave the weather and the cold to get crucial gear like better clothes, tools, and weapons. Until you get some of this gear, most players would tend to agree that the upper bound of risk acceptance comes down, meaning it's unwise to engage in certain activities without risking life and limb until you are geared up. It's simply not necessary to be super aggressive until you're kitted out. Once you are, however, that upper bound moves forward again. You can be more aggressive, you can run through wolf regions without fear, etc. This calculus, however, becomes much tighter in Interloper. In a future video, I'll talk about stages to the game, like early and mid-game. For now, let's just focus on this balancing act in regard to playstyle tuning. In the first few days in Interloper, you have nothing, you're going to get almost nothing, and the weather is cold to begin with. Hostile wildlife may not be as common as in Stalker, and it won't notice you from as far away, but it is much more deadly. In the beginning, you have to move, and move quickly. You aren't going to get much food or water early on, and your clothing is going to be downright pitiful. This means your lower bound of risk acceptance goes above even the top or higher bound of risk acceptance in the Stalker difficulty. You have to push through tight wolf corridors and trench through windy and snowy weather to get to the next location to even get enough supplies to last the next day. In the first days of Interloper, there is no upper bound of risk acceptance. Any dawdling will snowball, because if you stick around, you're not going to get any resources to be able to keep your needs up, to keep your condition up. If you stick around and you move too slow, you die. Therefore, there is no upper bound. Blizzards can actually even be a respite in the first week of Interloper, as you can actually explore without fear of wolves. Once you do get a base layer of clothing and food set up, the next step is crafting all your tools and weapons. Once that's done, you can adopt a far less aggressive, lower bound of risk tolerance, and then set a higher bound based off of your goals. Again, that higher bound must be determined by your goals. We will discuss goal setting in the next video. As a reminder, your needs and condition are linked, but through core gameplay loops diametrically opposed. Keeping needs full to keep your condition up requires potential sacrifice of said condition, and it does also require using up your needs like fatigue, temperature, and food to explore the world. Playstyle tuning is the art of adopting a viable risk window for the experience or difficulty level that you play at to ensure that you're moving quickly enough to gear up and weapon up without exposing you to undue risk or decisions that could snowball into worse decisions, leading to death. Managing this risk window is directly tied to goal setting, so look for that next video in the playlist to learn about that. As always, stay safe and stay warm out there.